Okay, everyone, welcome to our meeting for this month. Welcome to visitors, also to members. We have with us tonight the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania, representatives Richard Howlett, Hayden Honeywood and Rex Moncur. So these guys have also volunteered to come out to the open night to give our visitors there an extra experience with bouncing radio signals off the moon, and that's one of the topics they're going to talk about today, as well as satellite communication. So please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Hayden. This is Richard, and Rex is Rex and Richard are the experts. I'm just the one that sort of
Richard's not the expert. Rex is the expert.
So yeah, today we're going to talk about
grasshopper.
Amateur radio and space communications. So amateur radio is a very big hobby. It's got lots of different facets of it, and this one's probably one of the more interesting ones, I think, to a lot of people. Gets them involved in all sorts of different things, and I guess it kind of blends in with what you guys do. You're interested in the higher end of the spectrum with visual things that you can see through a telescope. We're interested in the lower part of the spectrum, things that you can hear and decode and receive, and radio frequencies and all that sort of stuff. So just quickly with those photos, obviously one's the International Space Station, and we'll go into that a little bit later on about how amateur radio is a big part of the ISS. And the other is the dish that will be out at the open day in a few weekends' time. And that's actually Richard's dish, which is on the back of a trailer and can be driven around and is portable. So
sort of portable.
Sort of portable. So that's and that's sitting in your backyard doing some moonbounce there. So we'll talk about that too. So just a little bit about us. First of all, myself, I've been licensed, had an amateur radio license since 2004. I'm the current REAST president, and I've been on the committee for about 6 years now. Couple of personal achievements. I've got a record on 1.2 gigahertz, which is a national record, and I'm also a dual record holder on 2.4 gigahertz. That was over.
And 5.7 as of today.
No, that was Tasmanian record, okay. Not national record. But yeah, there's that as well. So that was over 2,000 Ks. The 1.2 gigahertz record was actually held for about 10 minutes by Rex. And then I managed to beat it about 10 minutes later, yeah. So another 10 kilometres. By 10 kilometres, yeah. So technically we're both in the record books there. And I've also got a YouTube channel called Ham Radio DX where I do all sorts of videos related to amateur radio, so you can view those. Tricky, do you want to talk about yourself?
Oh yeah. People call me Tricky. They call me probably lots of other things, but so I've been licensed since 1986. I'm a fabby welder by trade. I met a guy when I started my apprenticeship who sort of told me about all these really cool radio things. So I went round to his place, which was like, I got to admit, straight out of the archives, but it was pretty cool, and the rest is history, as they say. I've been involved with the REAST with Hayden and a lot of the boys, and also involved with having a record on 2.4 and 3.4 gigs. Sort of for some context, 2.4 gigs is what you use for your Wi-Fi, for your phone to talk to your router. So sometimes you have trouble with your router at home, and we actually managed to go sort of
to New Zealand.
Yeah, to New Zealand. So,
we run a bit more power than a Wi-Fi router.
Yes. If you ran that much power in your Wi-Fi router, you'd probably be in strife. So my day job, I'm a comms rigger working for a local telco, welder by trade, which is a really handy thing because one of the things that's often missing is the ability to be able to sort of build things. And it's really cool to be able to actually go, I'd like to be able to build this thing. And got a couple of acquaintances, Ken, who's a pretty dab hand at a lathe and stuff. So with his skill and my skill and a few ideas, all the sky's the limit. So yeah, that's about it. And a crazy moonbounce guy, thanks to Rex, who sort of got me into these drugs.
And Rex is probably smarter than, I reckon, all of us combined in the club. He's probably the smartest person that going around. So Rex is a world record holder on AME, Earth Moon Earth holder on 10 gigs and 24 gigs. Had to travel around the world to do that. Ex-Antarctic Division Director, and also a REAST Life member since 2015, and also a crazy Moonbounce operator, amongst a whole range of
He's the sensei, crazy Moonbounce.
He is. The key thing that binds us all together is we're all experimenters and builders. That's probably what we're all interested in, and it's a big part of what our club is. We have every Wednesday night at the Domain. We're at the top of the Queen's Domain. In actual fact, I think that's the next slide. We're at the top of the Queen's Domain. We have experimenters nights every Wednesday. So we'll have different topics, probably similar to what you have here, show and tell, formal presentations, informal presentations, all that sort of thing, all to do with amateur radio and electronics as well. So everyone's welcome to come up on a Wednesday night. We're there from usually 6 o'clock onwards till pretty late. So so drop up and say hello. Tomorrow night we'll be there, and we've got a forum night. So we've got an open floor tomorrow night for a topic on test equipment. So we'll be talking about all the test equipment that we use. You can find us at reast.asn.au. So there's more information on our website there with all the things that we sort of do. So the first thing is, well, what is amateur radio? There's a lot of words on here, but in a nutshell, what it is it's a licensed radio communication service for experimentation, education, and in some places public service. Here in Australia, or well, here in Tasmania especially, we also provide a service to the community with horse endurance rides for public safety, and in the past we've also had car rallies as well, so community communications, Targa, yep, those sort of things. In the United States, public safety is a big thing for amateur radio. They do large-scale emergency communications and help out the emergency services over there. We use radio waves to communicate around the world, but also into space, which is rather cool. And it's individuals with a technical curiosity, how things work, experimentation, building things. Builders and makers, I think, was the...
Builders and breakers.
Builders, makers and breakers, yeah. So what can you do with amateur radio? This is by no means a comprehensive list, but we can talk around the world, but it's kind of more than just talking. You can do that today on a phone or via the internet. We can bounce signals off the moon. So we can send a signal to the moon and back and receive it. We can communicate with people all around the world using that. We can communicate through the International Space Station. We can talk to astronauts. We can talk to other amateur radio stations who are in the coverage footprint of the ISS as it flies over. We can track and talk through other satellites orbiting the Earth. We can build, experiment with our own antennas and radios. We can receive signals from deep space probes and weather satellites. And in actual fact, we were talking about this. There's an article here in the Amateur Radio magazine, which gets released every 2 months. And it's talking about a guy in Queensland who's been receiving deep space network spacecraft radio on 8 gigs. So if you're interested in that, you can have we'll pass that around and have a bit of a read. I was talking to Lisa before the start of the presentation. She said she was receiving weather satellites using an SDR. That's, you know, $20 for a little USB dongle, plug it into an antenna, and you can receive pictures from space. Support emergency communications during disasters. We now have these days digital modes. So we can send digital, think of it, text by radio. We can send that all around the world and be decoded. And that is happening every day. And we can connect with a global community of like-minded people like us. So, and more interestingly, which Rex will go into towards the end of the presentation, is we can communicate over ways that we never thought we could by scattering signals or sending signals and scattering them off clouds, meteors, aurora, or even lightning, which is a reasonably new concept which has been proven and done, which is very interesting indeed. That photo there is Rich's dish again, and what we call the field day van. So every 4 times a year?
4 times a year.
3 to 4 times a year. Yeah. We go out and bring all of our radios portable. Usually we go to the top of Mount Wellington and we try to make contact with
It's an ex-ABC outside broadcast van that was retired quite a number of years ago, and one of the guys that used to work there bought it, and we kept trying to buy it off him because it's got a 10-metre high pump-up mast in the middle that are like $1 squillion. We kept saying to this guy, do you want to sell it? No. Do you want to sell it? And finally enough, his wife badgered him enough to get rid of it out of the driveway, and he sold it. So it's ours now.
So sometimes you might be driving up the mountain. If you see that parked on the side of the road with a whole heap of antennas, don't worry, it's just us doing crazy things.
Playing radios, yeah.
In actual fact, we did that last weekend, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
So the first part, I guess, we'll go into is working satellites. So there's lots of different satellites that are orbiting the Earth at the moment. Some of them have got amateur radio on board. They've got a lot of them have little FM repeaters on board, so that you can talk using something as simple as a handheld radio. A little bit easier if you've got a handheld radio and an external antenna. You can track it across the sky. There's a guy in Victoria that's got a whole rig set up where he puts his radio on the antenna and he's got his phone that he pops in, and he can see exactly where the satellite is and can track it across the sky as he's listening to people and getting a signal from that. These are typically low Earth orbit, so they're not visible for too long, but they're enough to be able to communicate through. There are some medium Earth orbit satellites which have a larger footprint, so you can obviously then speak to people further away within that footprint. And yeah, simple gear. There are some abilities to be able to track in real time, and that image or those images there is actually one of our members who lives in Launceston. He's literally just built this in the last 2 weeks. He's got the antennas there, mounted them on a rotator, which is on the top of the pole in his backyard. He's got a full satellite tracking system connected to the computer, and that automatically moves and tracks the satellites. He doesn't have to do anything.
And controls the radio.
And controls
it counts for Doppler shift.
The Doppler shift of the radio, because as the satellite's passing over, the frequency changes. So that does all automatically. Some satellites also transmit telemetry images and other experiments, and we'll go into some of those a little bit later as well. Richard's been a big satellite worker, haven't you, for a long time?
Played with satellites back when there was an Oscar 10. We're now up to like Oscar 103 or whatever, but I learned with a Molinia type orbit, the ones where you could work overseas with like 10 watts on a UHF radio, and the satellite would be in view for hours. It was in a Molinia orbit where it would come in really close, like 500 kilometres away, but then go out to apogee at 40,000 kilometres. So in the right time of the orbit, you effectively had a sort of a mirror in the sky, if you like, to all around the world for ages. And with really modest sort of homemade equipment, it was sort of pretty cool.
And we were only talking about AO7, which is a satellite that's still in orbit and still working.
Yeah.
Another article.
Built in Australia.
Yeah, another article just recently that was written up, 50 years. It died, came back to life, and now kind of half works in the sunlight. So
fortunately, there's no off switch, so it's in the sun. It normally just works, and when it runs out of sun, it stops. So.
Yeah. So that's all. It's all very cool stuff. Of course, the biggest satellite, the biggest man-made satellite, I should say, is the International Space Station. Now, the ISS, since its sort of inception, had amateur radio on board. The ARISS, Amateur Radio International Space Station program, is run out of the US, I think, or is it UK? I think it's US.
So US.
And they do a great job. They're involved with putting amateur radio on board for the ability for not only the astronauts to use it, but also for school kids to be able to link up, talk live to an astronaut via the radio. Astronauts can use it during their downtime, and then when they're not using it, it's in an
It's a
automatic
big
mode.
PR thing too. Like they
Yeah.
obviously like to sort of make it a pretty flash thing that that school kids can talk to the astronauts.
Yeah, and we'll be going to in November. We're actually going to an event in Queensland called QTech, and they're organising a live astronaut to feed to talk via the radio via one of the schools there. So it's got a long waiting list. The school in South Hobart Primary did it many years ago down here, and I think a school on the West Coast, I think as well, potentially. I think trying to remember now.
I remember the one in South Hobart.
Yeah. So occasionally you'll get lucky, and an astronaut in their downtime will get bored and decide that they want to, and they're not working, and they'll decide to get on the radio. That image down the bottom left-hand corner is little Isabella. She, her dad there is an amateur radio operator in the UK, and to talk to an astronaut as an amateur radio operator would be a dream to be able to do. It just so happened he had his radio on listening one day, and he heard, I'm trying to remember the astronaut's name. Starts with a K.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. He heard him, and he grabbed her in. He said, come on. And she managed to make a call, and there's audio. I didn't put the audio in, but there's audio of her talking to this astronaut, and that's just. And then that led to her school, and then other people, talking to astronauts, and it was a great thing. So she really enjoyed it, and obviously her dad was a lot more happier that she was able to experience that than he was. So that was really good. So not only that, you can when they're not using the radio, as I mentioned, that's usually in a repeater mode.
Yeah.
So again, same as every other satellite, you can talk via it. You can send packet radio to it, so text messages, digital modes, and it's all accessible using just regular, again, VHF, UHF equipment or satellite tracking like I showed in the previous slide. So there's a photo of me in the middle using my little handheld radio and handheld antenna. I was actually talking at the same time there via the International Space Station to a friend of mine who lives in Craddock down near Cygnet. And yeah,
via the ISS,
and also a guy in Sydney at the same time. So
long path.
And we didn't actually plan that. He just happened to be listening. He had it on, I think, in his car, and we were talking via that. So, and that's astronaut Doug Wheelock. Yeah, there's a YouTube video of him making some amateur radio contacts on YouTube, which is a good video to watch. The other thing that they do on the ISS is slow scan television, which is pictures. So usually they'll transmit images. Anyone with a radio and even a smartphone or an SDR can receive and decode the images. Usually these are special events, so they'll commemorate space missions, historic events, and then what they'll do is they'll make a big thing of it so that you can submit the images that you get. You can get awards for that.
They make like a bunch of images and they number them. So the challenge is to obviously get all of them and sort of put them together and get them as the best quality that you sort of can.
And there's a couple of images that were actually live decoded by a couple of our members. They were posted in our Discord, and they were pretty good quality images. They tell us about this in advance. They usually post this all over social media and on their website. So they'll say, this event's coming up and there's plenty of time. They give you the frequency, the information, the mode, and it's just a simple piece of software.
All publicity is good publicity, and that when it works that it takes 2 minutes to send a picture. So they work on a 50% duty cycle, so it runs for 120 seconds and has a break for 120 seconds. And Murphy's, I'm sure, got a hand in the orbital times, because what will happen is it comes over the horizon, you'll just miss the first bit of that picture, and then you'll get one good picture, and then it'll disappear over halfway through the other picture. But you can be lucky and get 2, sometimes 3 good pictures in a pass. But
yeah, I'm not sure when the next one is, but if you keep an eye out for their releases, then again, if you've got an SDR or a simple radio, you can receive this at home. You don't need to be
an even would
yeah. You don't need to be an amateur radio operator to be able to receive these. And if you want to sort of dabble in SSTV as well, we transmit SSTV every Thursday night in what we call a net. So everyone gathers together at the same time. They all transmit images here in Hobart and Launceston. and also the northwest coast as well. And sometimes they're piped out to the internet. Ken's got a SSTV page where all of the images appear, and you can scroll through and see all of those in there. So if you send an image, you can see your image decoded and see how well it was getting through. So yeah, because there's a lot of them, a lot of images, isn't there? And slow scan television is also a big thing on HF radio as well. So there's another member of our club in Hobart. He leaves his radio sitting on HF and decodes images all around the world. You do that as well, do you, Ken? Yeah. Yep. So receiving images all around the world.
A lot of pictures.
So now the biggest challenge in amateur radio is Moonbounce, EME. So I said about LISS being the largest satellite. Technically, no, the Moon is the largest satellite. It's the biggest and most distant thing that we can bounce the signal off and receive it back here as a passive repeater, I suppose you could call it. There are some real big technical problems with doing this, and Richard's a lot more versed in this than me, and you can go through some of those the challenges you face.
As Hayden says, it's a pretty cool thing, and years ago, people that did Moonbounce were guys that had horrifically big stations and lots of power, and it was all very, most people would look at it and go, yeah, nah, not sort of going to ever be able to do it. But we were pretty fortunate. We've got Rex in our club who is very experienced, and he came up and brought his portable system up to our radio club and did a demonstration where we actually worked a few stations via the Moon with his sort of portable system, which I was pretty impressed at, which you sort of can't help but not be impressed. So I wanted to basically sort of get amongst it, but then I sort of learnt that you can do Moonbounce on a smally sort of scale, but you've just got to pay a lot of attention to detail because, as Hayden alluded to, the signal path is, I think it's 290 odd dB of loss, depending on frequency. So you've got to build a system that basically has enough performance to be able to generate a strong enough signal that's basically going to reach the Moon, and then about, is it 3% or something of it is reflected back, and then of course that loss is then sort of lost again. So incredibly small amounts of energy arrive back. So you've got to be able to detect all those and hence not waste any. So lots of times ham radio people and hobbyists, when you build things, you don't always have the best stuff. You go, oh look, I'll just make do with that and this will do and I'll fix that up later. Like, yeah, no, Moonbounce, got to put those ideas out of your head, don't you, Rex? There was no room at all for any sort of substitution loss or sort of not doing it sort of spot on. So I sort of set off on a bit of a journey, and one of the things I noticed when Rex did it, his system was very manual, sort of like he had sort of a turntable that basically you had to put like a compass on. So you would basically look at a computer printout and say, okay, the Moon's at 326 and 26. So you look through an inclinometer, and then there was the actual communications technique, which is a weak signal mode called WSJTX. And it's a very busy process. There's lots of things to do, lots of things happening. And I was pretty impressed at the fact Rex was able to be across all of this stuff and make it work. It doesn't sort of look impressive when you see it. You'll just see like a little red thing come up on a screen, and then you'll see a green thing, you'll see another red thing, and then people will go, "Wow, wow, that's really cool." So it's sort of not really a particularly impressive thing to see, but when you look at actually what you've achieved, it's pretty amazing. So with a great deal of help from Rex, I built the tilting and tracking frame for that dish. I sort of didn't know what I'd got myself into. Rex sort of said, "Oh, are you keen to do this stuff?" "Oh, I'm super keen." And he sat down over a coffee and sort of gave me some really hard, bad news about what this stuff's going to cost and how much effort it's going to take. So after I got up and went, "Yeah, look, let's still do it," he arrived at my work with a trailer with said dish on the back, saying, "Oh, you'll need a dish." So they had a bit of help from a friend of mine, Murray, and we just basically came up with the idea of of mounting the frame on an old Land Cruiser hub, rolled some steel, and I went down a bit of a road of using gearboxes, azimuth and elevation gearboxes, but a wise bloke told me that would never work because it was too much backlash, and he was right. So I now use linear actuators to do elevation and to do rotation, and absolute encoders, and yeah. But it's one of those things. It's a bit of a mission that you start, and it's very easy to get sidetracked and sort of a bit despondent, like, it's never going to work. You know, this is just so hard. There's so many little obstacles to get over that you just go, it's too hard. And so, but look, you know, it's such cool fun. But yeah, it just takes a little while to sort of get there. But
you want to talk about spreading as well?
Yeah. So one of the things, obviously, the things that affect the quality of the signal is the distance the moon is away, and the moon sort of goes from being about 365,000 odd kilometres away to about 406,000, I think, roughly. You guys will probably know better than me, but so that affects that makes a difference of about 2.2 dB difference in the signal just between when it's close and when it's a long way away. One of the things that affects the signal is, if you can imagine the moon effectively sort of during different parts of its orbit, it actually wobbles on its axis. So when the radio wave, like the beam coming out of my antenna, is about 0.5 degree wide, so it's about as wide as the moon. When the signal reflects back, the stuff that comes from this side of the moon can arrive slightly different time at what the stuff coming off this side of the moon. So effectively, the signal that comes back is effectively spread wider than. So effectively, the energies have to be divided over a wider sort of frequency range, which makes it less intense. So, but you can calculate that. Computers are wonderful. You can sit down and work out when will the spreading be the minimum, and you obviously try, depending on the size of your system, when you try and set up a skid with someone on the other side of the world, you try and pick a time that's optimum. The software will let you do that. When Rex broke the world record, he spent hours and, in fact, planned it over months and months and months to work out that at this time, in this place, and this place, this will be the minimum elevation, which will then break the world record. So, okay, I need to be here, and you need to be there. It was like, so you can, the good thing and the bad thing is you can plan it, but there's lots of hurdles, which, yeah.
And a lot of this stuff used to be not as accessible. It used to be CW was the mode, Morse code. So you'd need obviously a lot more gain, bigger antennas, more power.
That's right.
And voice is even harder unless you've got a very large dish like out at Mount Pleasant, but unfortunately we can't use that.
There are some guys that are doing, obviously as the frequency goes higher, you sort of have it's a bit of a double-edged sword. As the frequency gets higher, you can have more gain out of an antenna. Like a 1 metre dish can have a huge amount of gain at 10 gigahertz or 24 gigahertz. Whereas to get gain at like 144 megahertz, you need multiple Yagi antennas all co-phased together, and it can take up, there was a guy in Germany that had 130 Yagis all stacked together, which was just an immense thing. But of course, the issues with doing that is when you join antennas together, you effectively, if you have one antenna and you put two, you effectively, almost hypothetically, double the amount of power that you can sort of transmit and receive in gain. So then to double that, you've got to go to 4, and then to 8, and then to 16, and to 32, which sort of sounds easy if you're a mechanical guy. But then the issues of having to match all of those antennas perfectly, because you go from 16 antennas as long as this room, all mounted on a big pole that you can fully steer, then you add another 16. If you haven't got the matching exactly right, you might not gain the 3 dB, you might only gain 1. So it's just, whereas at 10 gigahertz, it's really quite straightforward, well, more straightforward to actually have an immense amount of gain. Like, not sure, I haven't done the math, but the 20 watts that I've got coming out of my 1.8 metre dish, if you work out the gain, it would probably end up in about 120,000 watts of affected radiated power. So
Don't stand in front of it.
that's right. But look, that's not magic. That's just basically physics aiming all of the energy into a narrow sort of half a degree wide beam width. So
That's actually probably one thing too that is that we do have to make sure is RF safety is a big thing. So when we get to these sort of frequencies and size dishes with that amount of gain, we need to make sure that
don't stand
in front of it when it's transmitting. Make sure that especially if you're in a public location where sometimes we do set up that no one's going to pass in front of it as well.
Yep. But, ooh,
We've
evil scientist in the midst.
I know, yeah. One of the videos we did contemplate doing was putting a chicken in front of it, didn't we, and see how long it takes to cook. But I don't think
we have that much power.
No, I don't think we have that much power. No.
We have a friend in Denmark that has a particularly high powered system. Again, I've got a 1.8 metre dish with 20 watts, and I can nearly work anybody that's currently set up to work Moonbounce. There's a guy in Denmark, Peter, OZ1LPR, who has, admittedly, he has an amplifier that generates about 600 watts. By the time that energy gets to the dish and the feed, he's probably lost sort of close to a half, but that's an immense amount of energy. And that might get close to your idea of vaporising. Yeah.
I don't want a bird flying.
That was that's a lot of power, but I don't know. I sort of work in the industry as a sort of comms rigger, and I've been certainly been cold a few times, but I've never been that cold to sort of try that. Yeah. Look, depending on frequency, there is a possibility that you could get sort of localised sort of warming, but that's not me.
Yeah. At microwave frequencies, because it's so concentrated as well, it's probably not really spread across the whole body as well. It's very concentrated.
It'd be a bit hazardous with obviously the part of your body that's most hazardous to that stuff would be your eyes because of sort of moisture and stuff. Especially around the sort of 2 gigahertz, that's an area that is a bit.
There is a video on YouTube of some people in Europe, I won't say what country they were in, pulling a microwave apart and connecting up the magnetron to a baked bean can and causing some damage. It's quite an entertaining video.
Not the same guy that put the 509 volt batteries together, no.
Possibly,
yeah.
The dish out at Mount Pleasant was used. What year was that? 2000. We were trying to figure it out.
It was the 40th anniversary. We got to borrow it, and we sent a signal to the moon and back to.
Is that Goon Hilly?
Dingaloo.
Oh, Dingaloo. Yeah. Yep.
With a big radio telescope. We were able to communicate with 3 milliwatts, and that big dish out of Mount Pleasant. Sorry? The big dish, yeah.
And
it was about a 25 minute one in time.
That was on voice, Rex?
No,
that was on
digital.
Oh, was it? Yeah, okay.
We couldn't run high power voice because the big dish has got super
Cryogenically cooled.
Helium preamplifiers, and they didn't want us to run 100 watts up there.
In Western Australia, though, they did that, didn't they? I think they ran quite a bit of power into one of the dishes.
So on 5.7, wasn't that old mate Keith that they worked with the guys in Goon Hilly to try and do some stuff on 5.7, but I think they had issues.
And we talk about digital signals. So the program that we use is called WSJTX, which was conceived and developed by a very, very smart person in the US, Nobel Prize winner, Joe Taylor. Rex is a personal friend of Joe Taylor. And that's sort of morphed now in the ability to, like Richard mentioned about all those multiple Yagis, lots and lots of antennas. Now someone with a single Yagi on like 140 megahertz can send a signal with reasonably low power, 100 watts, 120 watts, to a variety of stations around the world using that software to send.
Normally, there's like one. There's, as Hayden said, in the old days, if you like, of Moonbounce, everybody had to have a big antenna array. So it was really only the sort of the clever, cool, rich kids that could have the big arrays. Whereas now there's still a few establishments around the world that have got pretty large arrays, but because of the gains of this WSJTX, they can work single Yagi stations. So, you know, anybody could just rock up with, like that guy in Germany that had 130 Yagis, he was a bit of a doer. He actually made a point of working a guy with, I think, a 2 or 3 element Yagi, like a very short Yagi, just because he could. But he did all the heavy lifting. He had a huge amount of transmit gain and a huge amount of receive gain.
So now some people put the challenge out. They try and use the smallest antenna they can with the lowest amount of power to, you know, so then it kind of becomes even more of a challenge.
In fact, now Rex worked a guy in England using the horn aperture. It was 6 inches by 4 inches and 10 gigs. 4x3. Should remember, because I know the bloke that made it.
And the funny story, I think, with WSJTX with Joe Taylor is he's an amateur radio operator as well, and he was retiring, I think, and he wanted to go back to do amateur radio as a hobby, and he decided to develop this program to explore these weak signal modes, and at least that was the story that I understand it. But there's probably a little bit more to it.
It's a bit of software that's revolutionised the hobby, because one of the biggest issues with playing, we're probably a little off the subject, but most people that sit and listen to ham radio bands will often sort of tune around the bands, traditionally listening for people to talk to. And of course, people will tune around the band, and if they don't hear anybody, they'll go, oh, the band's dead. But the reason is often not that the bands are dead, it's because nobody's talking at that time. So if you sort of skim over someone, or you're listening when they're not, you know, when they're not talking, or vice versa. Whereas with WSJTX, it's sort of started off a bit of a divide, because it's effectively my computer talking to your computer over the airwaves. It's almost automated. You still got to know a lot of things, but it's had a bit of a resurgence of activity of ham radio. So now lots and lots and lots of people run a mode called FT8.
Thousands of people.
And you tune to any FT8 segments of any of the bands at any time of the night or day, and you'll hear
There's
signals.
Hundreds of stations all around the
and
world.
it's if the band is open, like 40 megs or 7 megs of a night, like into America, you can just see on your waterfall just a mass of signals. There can be like 50 signals all in this one pass band, and after the 15 seconds, you'll see 20 or 30 or 40 call signs all just appear out of the noise. And then the next 15 seconds the same, and there's dozens of conversations all going on all at the one time.
And it's revolutionised things too, because we go through the solar cycle. We're on the way down from the peak now, apparently.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the solar cycle, it means that people can still communicate, because the WSJTX allows you to decode these signals way below the noise floor. So even signals that are not audible in the speaker, you can't.
So again, in the FT8 that's very popular, it's not particularly weak signal. You normally be able to hear it, but because that's only 15-second periods. So some of the modes that we've played with and Rex has played with, in another thing, you can transmit for up to 5 minutes. So then you listen for 5 minutes. So you can basically take that whole 5 minutes to gather all of the data and then process it and end up like with a result. So you get much more sensitivity. Obviously, the longer the sample period, but so it's a really good thing for radio. if you had two people on voice and the 1 3.5 kilohertz channel, you wouldn't make any sense of it. So yeah. But
So I guess we'll move on to some equipment that we use for EME.
okay,
So this is the small dish, or I call it the small dish.
this is probably
yeah.
what started it all. That one on the left, I believe, is Rex's 30 watt 600 mil system. And then one on the right is Rex's 1.1.
No, 77.
77, okay.
77 centimetres.
That runs 60 watts, and that's actually bolted onto Rex's balcony with a milling turntable to use as the azimuth drive, and it's all obviously sort of calibrated. And then there's a custom-made sort of tilting arrangement with a couple of bearings. And the whole lot obviously all sits behind the dish. The bit in front of the dish is the feed, so the funny-looking bit of copper there is called waveguide. So obviously at 10 gigahertz you can't use coax cable because it's too lossy. So that's like some rectangular section which is of a particular size that basically the energy travels up there and almost lossless or very little loss. So the transverter and all the equipment is sort of in the back of that, in that box.
And then the big dish, or the bigger dish.
Then some people say size is not everything. Yeah, so this is the result of a few years of sort of messing around. Almost identical to the dish in the previous thing, only just sort of bigger, same sort of feed. Call it a shepherd's crook feed. So basically the feed comes out the back and ends up with the little outlet pointing straight at the focal point of the dish to illuminate the dish properly. And that's one of the biggest problems with trying to get stuff to work at 10 gigs, because normally we don't have the luxury of being able to buy this stuff. It's sort of like secondhand. This was sort of ex-communications equipment. But we were very fortunate because there's a lot of science in matching the feed or the way you illuminate the dish, so you don't under-illuminate the dish and you don't over-illuminate the dish. It's got to be pretty right. And that's where all the science is. So we've been pretty fortunate that we've picked up these dishes that have got feeds that are actually designed for that dish. So they work sort of pretty well, whereas often it can be a problem. But it's the tracking system. So it's runs on a Raspberry Pi. There's a little hat that sits on a Raspberry Pi. A guy, Gary, out of the US, basically designed and built it. It's a pretty simple little bit of software. That's a pretty custom case, 3D printed by Ken, which is sort of pretty unique. And he just basically sits out at the dish, and I just VNC into that, and just the whole thing's remote. I can just turn it on with my ARLEC sort of PowerPoint app. The whole thing comes to life. Wait for it to boot, VNC into the machine, go, okay, track the moon. You see the thing just go off. And not sure if Hayden's got on there the picture with the rifle scope.
No, I don't.
But yeah, there's a rifle scope mounted on the side of the dish that I've calibrated using the sun. So basically, put a welding lens in front of the rifle scope. Basically, peak the dish backwards and forwards to get maximum noise from the sun, and then align the crosshairs of the rifle scope onto the sun. So then now I know where the dish is pointing. So basically, to calibrate this whole system, I just spin it round to the sun or to the moon or to any other sort of celestial object that I can see in the rifle scope, then just hit calibrate, and the thing knows sort of where it is, and it'll happily track. Because they're absolute encoders, it'll even track once you turn the power off. Like you turn it back on, it'll just remember where it was.
Radios, we got some show and tell.
Yeah, we have some show and tell, courtesy of Ken. This is a Coon transverter, so this is basically a very clever bit of kit that takes frequencies, what's called your IF radio or intermediate frequency radio of 144 megahertz or 430 megahertz, and along with a local oscillator, basically they combine them together to come out at 10 gigahertz. So there's a fair bit of science in here. This is usually GPS locked to keep it on frequency. It's probably something we should have mentioned. With GPS locking, we can generate a frequency and talk to another guy via Moonbounce and be within 1 or 2 hertz at sort of 10 gigahertz, which is sort of pretty amazing. So that's a transverter made by Kuhn. That's the latest iteration. That's very, very nice. We're probably looking down the barrel of 800 odd euros. So, yeah. So if you want to just pass that around and have a bit of a look, there'll be a pocket search at the end. Ken will stand at the door. So, so this device is an LNA or a low noise amplifier. Because even though the receivers in those transverters are very, very good, again, the whole Moonbounce thing is you've just got to get every possible bit of performance that you can. So people make low noise amplifiers that have got better noise figures, so they can basically see more of the signal. So
and less of the noise.
and exactly right, less of the noise. So, well, this is right, and this is a particularly unique because the inlet to that, which is behind the yellow tape here, it doesn't use coax. It basically, that's waveguide, so that basically attaches to the side of a thing called a waveguide switch. Now, you may have heard a thing called like relays that you use for switching electrical circuits. There are things called coax relays that, again, will switch RF, but at 10 gigs, they're pretty yuck. And Sensei Rex says, don't use relays at 10 gigs. You need a waveguide switch, which is another thing. You get a shopping list and like, oh, you get on eBay and you look at waveguide switch and you look at new prices and you just have a bit of a moment. But this stuff there's so much of it around, you've just got to keep your eye out because stuff comes up and you've just got to know what you want and just grab it. Oh, well, I know a bloke that did say go WR75, but anyway, we won't go there. So this is a preamp. Again, this is really sort of super cool technology. Again, you know, 300 or 400 euros of a thing, and which, you know, if you're not careful, can be damaged with static. So please be careful. And this is a waveguide switch. Yeah. So again, unlike a normal relay that just basically has like a little moving contact, this is actually a physical thing. So inside of here, you've got 4 ports, and inside there, 2 of the ports are joined together at 90 degrees. So basically, when you activate this little thing inside will spin around 90 degrees, and instead of these 2 ports being joined, these 2 ports will be joined. So basically, that's how you direct. You go from transmit to receive. So on one side of this, you would have your antenna. On one side, you would have your transmitter connected via a thing called a transition that goes from waveguide to coax. And on this side, you would have that LNA. So then when these 2 are joined, you're receiving. When those 2 are joined, you're transmitting. The ability of this too is it's very low loss, but it's also got lots and lots of isolation. Because if you've got lots of transmit power coming out of your transmitter, the last thing you want to do is have your preamp have a moment and suffer from overload. So these have got lots of isolation, but you still need to sequence the whole process. You can't just hit transmit and have everything go at once. You build a sequencer where basically
To do it all safely, yeah.
So you basically have, you know, this bit happened, the preamp turn off, this turn on, this turn on, this turn on, bazinga, then in reverse it goes around. So, anyway, pass that around.
And we mentioned the builders and everything. I think half of the joy that we get out of, well, I don't know about you, but half the enjoyment that I get out of something is building it, putting it all together, and then actually seeing it work. So, like,
that's right.
Putting all this stuff together, you know, some of us can't afford the flashier things, but you know, you sort of build up from scratch, and then you can upgrade components later and make your system better, and then gradually upgrade as you go along.
Look, you meet some people too that are incredibly resourceful. That's a WR90 waveguide switch designed for sort of like 8 to 10 gigs. As you get higher in frequency, Rex and a few of the boys have been playing with 24 gigahertz, so that uses a much smaller waveguide. So you still have a waveguide switch, but they are like the proverbial rocking horse poop. And if you buy them, like you can buy anything new, but they're thousands of dollars. So a couple of resourceful people in the Netherlands have actually built them, like machined all the bits, CNC machined the bits and built them for the hobby market, you know, like, which is just, you know, like you would never you would never make any money if you tried to do that commercially, but because they're a bunch of capable hobbyists, they'll just sort of go, oh, will anybody be interested in buying one of these if we were to build it? And I think they've sold a significant number of them. So, but it just goes to show that hams are a pretty resourceful sort of bunch.
So once all of this gear's been put together, you can, as we said, you can receive signals off the moon. So this is a picture of the beacon, or what we call the beacon in Germany, which basically transmits all the time, pointing at the moon when it can see it. 7.2 metre dish, 50 watts.
So you think we're crazy?
Yeah.
These guys are next level crazy. Like,
and on the right-hand side is that program that we were talking about, WSJTX. So to just quickly explain a few things, obviously in the left-hand box you'll see the UTC time. You'll see dB, that's the signal strength that is being received. The DT is the time delay. So you can see that they're over, what, 2.8, 2.7, 2.8. So that's a good indication that you're getting a signal from the moon because of the delay. Frequency, so that's the audio frequency. And then the message. So obviously CQ is a term, an amateur radio term for calling anyone. And followed by the call sign, which is DL0SHF, with a grid square, so it's location, and then the program knows that that's in Germany. And you've also got, I think you've got a couple of signals from a few other stations there.
yeah, so the concept of it is that you basically call CQ or say, I want to talk to somebody. So then someone will respond, and to qualify as a contact in ham radio terms, you need to exchange two pieces of information that can't be reasonably guessed, I think is the terminology. So one of them is call signs and one of them is a signal report. So to constitute having a contact in this particular mode, and to qualify it, each period, if you like, in this particular thing is 60 seconds. So you'll spend 60 seconds sending CQ. So that everybody that's watching the moon at that time will decode that. Now if someone goes, oh, I want to talk to him, they will double click on that. So what that will send is that will then send their grid square, their grid square? Their signal
report, yeah.
Their signal report, in other words, how well they hear me, they will send that back to me. I'll then basically send back a signal to say, yes, I've received your report. And then they will send back a message to say 73. So effectively that's the 4 sort of steps. So it takes 4 minutes to have a contact.
The idea of what you do is it might need to all the contacts that you make across the world and
Yep.
and record those and how long out distance. Or do you actually really have a conversation?
Look, obviously the traditional ham radio thing of having a conversation with someone is we talk like we're talking now on different bands. Obviously, doing Moonbounce, it's more of a technical achievement and challenge. And it's like, look, the ultimate thing on 10 gig EME would be to work 100 countries, because there's 306 or something determined DXCC countries in the whole world, and you get a really, really, really special award if you can work 100. Now, lots of people do it on HF. Some people will work 100, 200, 300 stations. It'd be really cool to work 100 stations on Moonbounce. So I've got to go off, yeah, so they're different countries or different entities. So I've got 30 so far out of 100, so I've got a long, long, long way to go. But yeah, it's more for the technical challenge, and it's a really quite a tight-knit community that you sort of get to know people, and we've been really fortunate having Rex, who's again a bit of Moonbounce royalty. So it's amazing, you know, you move in the circles and people sort of know, oh, well, often if I chat to people, and again, it's like a text message, you'll have your contact. And quite often at the end, you'll send a message to say, so thanks, take care, 73. So 73 is just to sort of have a nice day, you know, best wishes. Quite often, some of them will say, regards to Rex.
And the other thing also too is there's a bit of an age-old.
We send QSL cards
to confirm.
That maybe we'll pass that around, but that's printed by a guy in Ukraine, funnily enough. Cheapest place to get QSL cards printed is Ukraine. He's like about a fifth of the cost of anybody in Australia.
And then so once we've made a contact like that, fill out the QSL card with all the details, what their signal report is, the time, post that off, get another one back, and you'll see some ham radio operators will have a full wall full of all these cards from all these different countries. I don't generally I don't collect QSL cards
Look,
that much.
there's been a big explosion in the number of contacts in QSL cards because of this FT8, because there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of contacts every hour all over the world. And there's a thing called a QSL bureau where all of the radio clubs around the world will take their cards and send them all over the world sort of very cheaply. They can take many, many months to arrive, but EME is a pretty special thing. So you get some nice cards printed, and if someone sends you, well, whenever you have a contact with someone new, you always post them a card. We've actually just worked a guy in, what's the island off Italy? IS0, Sardinia. So these guys, based in Switzerland, decided to go for a holiday. So they loaded a whole bunch of microwave equipment, dishes and amplifiers and tracking stuff into their car, called a ferry, went across to Sardinia and set up and worked probably 100 odd people on Moonbounce on different bands. So that's a thing called a de-expedition, which is sort of very rare. So
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're going for time, but
okay.
yeah. What we might do is we'll just go quickly through. This is a video of you receiving off the moon. So you can see that little line, there's the actual signal. You can just hear it in the speaker as well.
So that's coming off the moon on 10 gigahertz. Yeah, so it uses, yeah.
It doesn't sound like much, but
That's pretty impressive.
yeah. I think that's it, isn't it? Just, yeah.
And what the beacon sends, it sends this Q65D on the even minutes, and then on the odd minutes it sends traditional Morse code.
Oh, there is the rifle.
It is, yes.
There is the rifle. I did put.
That's not actually, yeah, that's actually Rex's dish. But yeah, I plagiarised the idea and I have a rifle. It's pretty funny. I walked into the sports shop, the gun shop in Glenorchy, to buy a rifle scope, as you do. So I've walked in there and sort of wandered around. The guy's like, "Oh, can I help you, mate?" "Yeah, look, I've come to buy a rifle scope." "Oh, what sort of gun do you want to put it on, mate?" "Going to put it on a dish." And the lady at the back goes, "Oh, we had a guy in here a little while ago." So the guy's sort of wrapping it up, taking my money. Of course, he showed me the rifle scopes. He's like, "Oh, you know," before I got the message that it wasn't for a gun, he's like, "Oh, these ones for $100, and these are $400, and these are $700, and these are $2,700, and these are $8,000. I'm like, whoa, come back to this $100 one. Just want to be able to see the moon.
So yeah, if you want to see some more information, we've got a couple of videos on my channel, so you can just go to my channel there and search for moon, and you'll find the videos that we've done on that. So yeah, it's rather interesting.
One of the more successful videos you did was actually when we didn't have the contact. We actually spent half an hour and it didn't work.
Didn't work. And it made Hackaday as well, I think. It was on there. So I guess we'll pass over to Rex quickly to talk about what he's been doing with infrared stuff.
Okay.
You want this?
Oh, I'll just hold it. I want to just cover a few things that we're doing, especially in Tasmania, and they're not being done anywhere else in the world. And the one we've been doing is bouncing radio signals off lightning. But the one I'll talk about is bouncing signals off clouds. And in this case, I'm at this end in Hobart, and I'm sending what is essentially light, or near infrared. The problem with light is people get upset about bright lights and think there's a bushfire and report it. But by going to near infrared, we don't have that problem. And we're sending a signal from Hobart to Georgetown. Now, it turns out the guy in Georgetown, he's got an amateur call sign VK7EKA, but he's one of your group. He's Merv Millwood. And I built the transmitter and took it up to Georgetown, and he transmits back to me. So you can see it clearly not line of sight, and the only way we can get signals from here to Georgetown is bounce them off clouds, and we don't want low clouds, because if there's low clouds, that stops the signal getting to the high clouds. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's the first time it's been done anywhere in the world. Where's the buttons? That one. Now, these are signals that are bounced off the clouds. The same sort of messages that you saw on Richard's getting off the moon, we're getting them off the clouds. The trick is you don't want low clouds. Now, this is humidity along here, and surprisingly, if the humidity, you'd think you needed 100% humidity to get cloud, but in fact, you can get cloud around little ice particles with less than 100% humidity. So depending on the height, we plot where the clouds should occur. And we also have to plot whether it's liquid or ice. And the humidity under ice is the red. So it's higher than the humidity if it was water. So in this case, there's a chance that we're going to have some low cloud here and some medium cloud here, but some quite strong, thick, high cloud. And yeah, this is the transmitter, which is just LEDs like torch lenses, but 90 of them. 90 of them at Georgetown, at Merv's place. And my receiver has a large Fresnel lens and an avalanche photodiode to receive the signal. It's a fairly large avalanche photodiode, 1 centimetre by centimetre, to pick up as much energy as possible. Next. Now, the problem, and I'm sure you guys have the same problem, is if you're in Hobart and you're beaming to Georgetown, you're beaming over all the northern suburbs of Hobart, and there's a lot of light. And the interesting thing is when you break that down and look at the frequency, there at 1300 hertz, you can see that wobbly line there. So every 100 hertz, which is when you actually have a bridge rectifier driving some light source, you get 100 hertz rather than 50 hertz. And that's what the harmonic at 1300 hertz is actually doing. The hydro's trying to keep the frequency right, but they're wobbling all over the place. As well as that, there's these very straight lines every 60 hertz. And you wonder where do they come from? And that's because all these outside big displays, big display signs, they're all on 60 hertz with big lead all in the northern Hobart. So we've got to find our signal in all of this. Now this is a fairly strong signal, minus 24 dB, and that's the actual signal under that green line. And that signal is actually changing frequency very slightly, which is transmitting the message. Next one. Now this is a weaker signal, minus 35 dB. Now you can see under the green line, you can hardly see it, but there is a signal there, and that's decoding perfectly. Now, a few of us are wondering about, and partly we thought it'd be worth discussing it with you guys, whether we can do moonbounce with light. There's a number of problems, and we probably don't have time to go into it. But if there's anyone interested in talking to us about using large telescopes and narrow filters so that we can detect light off the moon, we'd like to do it. Thank you.
Not sure if we've got any time for questions, but I'm sure you can talk to us afterwards.
Yeah, time for 2 or 3 quick questions. I'll take the microphone around.
I was just listening to a podcast in space, and they've put some cameras onto the International Space Station, full on the Earth, and they are live transmission directly on the time. You're getting, because the International Space was supposed to like 600 megahertz of maximum data transmission or something. Are you part of that, or is that your signal embedded in that 600 megahertz, or is it separate from you?
No, I think that's a separate thing. I think that's probably more of a NASA thing than what we do. The signal on the International Space Stations that we're looking at are more 140 megahertz, and do they do UHF as well? I think 400.
They do
430 megahertz. But yeah, 600 megahertz is not an amateur band.
No, it's not the megahertz, the maximum bandwidth they can give them on the International Space Station.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
they'd have obviously, as the ISS flies over, they'd have ground stations that would basically sort of like link up and sort of keep a complete connection.
Would that interfere with you or not?
Nah, not at all.
Right.
Their signal will be up around probably 8 gigahertz. Spread around 600.
We do have ground stations though that monitor amateur radio frequencies as it flies over the Earth as well, mainly for the school link-ups. So it means that they don't have to wait for them necessarily to come over where the school actually is. They could be anywhere in the world, and then they could connect through someone else's. Yeah.
The school, I'll use the telebridge, where basically the people doing the contact with the school will actually use like NASA's infrastructure, if you like, to sort of basically be talking to the ISS probably actually before it comes over the horizon, and then a little bit after it's gone, just obviously for the experience. But there is I think the hams have got a 2.3 gigahertz digital TV transmitter that is very problematic, but when it's going, it'll just transmit on 2.3 gigahertz DVB-S. So if you get a DVB-S like a satellite receiver and tune to 2.3, you can basically watch live video. But it's a bit of a challenge. You need a big dish.
I just thought I didn't put in the slideshow presentation. There's one geostationary satellite that amateur radio operators can use. Unfortunately, the footprint covers Europe and just off the coast,
30 k's
off the coast of Western Australia. And you can actually, we can send fast scan amateur television via that and then back. But unfortunately, we can't do that.
We have one question.
Just a really quick one. I'm really interested in this bouncing off the lightning that you were talking about. Can you just give a really quick rundown on that for us? I know time's short, but...
Yeah, well, when lightning flashes, you ionize the air, and that ionization stops the signal. But the rest of the signal goes around it and builds up, a bit like when a wave goes past an island, you get the waves building up. And we get a stronger signal on the other side of the lightning. The only problem is it typically only lasts for about 0.1 of a second. So we've got to transmit a message like this, like, with two call signs and a report, has all got to be transmitted in 0.1 of a second. We actually transmit it in 70 milliseconds and hope that the lightning occurs. So we keep repeating, and if the lightning hits, we get that message through. And then once you've got that message, you've got to send the reply message, wait for the next. The best we've done is get a lightning contact in 3 minutes. But that was between Hobart and Southern Victoria. And that's the first time that's been done anywhere in the world.
Excellent. So I'm assuming you use lightning trackers so you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
in fact,
cool.
my phone went off with a lightning track while I
Yeah.
was sitting here.
Fascinating. Thanks.
What? It was all just in Bass Strait, north of Devonport, just a bit north, roughly halfway between. Yeah. Right.
Right, we've got one last question up there.
Actually, we've got a couple of quick questions. The first one's really simple. Moonbounce, its acronym is EME.
Yeah.
EME. Oh, the side about frying chickens and whatever. 10 gig bounce the moon. Don't stand in front of it because you're going to fry your brain. Obviously, the signal is dissipating at a great rate of knots as you're going towards the moon. Why aren't you frying planes?
Anything that's flying planes is significantly outside the scope of anything.
Well, inverse square law.
So obviously
Inverse
it's
square law,
dangerous.
once
But
you get, and the discussion about frying chickens is a little bit overrated because Richard's dish, for instance, is 1.8 metres wide. So the energy is never concentrated like a laser.
yeah, right.
And so he wouldn't be able to fry a chicken.
I just use that as a
Yeah.
as a
I
example.
mean,
But still dangerous to stand in front of, obviously. But so even though obviously objects circumventing the Earth, they're obviously a lot closer than the Moon. So your signal's still a lot stronger at that sort of distance because it's still got to go to the Moon. And
when
back.
when you say a
So-
lot stronger, I mean the signal we're getting back is a millionth of a millionth of a millionth of a millionth of
Yes,
a
that's
millionth
right.
of a millionth.
So it's dissipating at a
of
great
what we
rate of knots.
transmit.
Yeah. I was thinking when it was going rather
So-
than when it was coming back.
Most of what we see misses the moon. Most of what reflects back off the moon misses us.
Yeah, right. Okay. And my last, third question, Ross. Sorry. Nothing. I appreciate nothing to do with you guys, but you meet on the top of the domain. There used to be an enormous hoop, which I always assumed was an aerial. What was it? It's gone now. Mast.
It was an aerial, and
Yes.
it belonged to the Overseas Telecommunication
Yep.
Commission,
Thanks.
who originally built the building that we're in. When they stopped transmitting to ships because of satellites, they gave the building to the Hobart Council. That because the building had been used to transmit signals to Mawson's expedition in 1912 in Antarctica, it was heritage listed, and because of the heritage listed, they wanted an activity in it that reflected what it was there for, and we fitted perfectly in. And what do we pay? $20 a year. There, so we're very lucky. Thank you.
Just quickly on your aircraft thing as well. That's another form of propagation which we use, aircraft scatter. So we can actually use aircraft halfway between two stations to actually bounce the signal off of the aircraft, which is also anything that moves or that we can see, we send a signal to it and see what happens.
And including the mounts, we use the mount.
Yes.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. So thanks, guys, Richard, Hayden, and Rex. So a fascinating discussion. A lot of things in common with our society. You live in the electromagnetic spectrum. Your hobby can be quite inexpensive, but probably not. It's usually going as high as you can, and it's and really it's just like us. It's nerds having fun, you know. But no, we really enjoyed your presentation. A lot of enthusiasm, and and it looks like it's a community like ours. You know, people working together, enjoying each other's company and the hobby that we're passionate about. So thank you once again, and we've got a small gift for you a little bit later. Yes, yes. So we're going to have a break for supper, a fairly quick break. I'm sure the guys will be open to any questions during the break while you're having a tea or coffee. So if you haven't put your name down on the lucky door prize, please do so, and we'll draw that straight after the break. Yes, Chris? Yeah. Okay. See you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
Sorry, that probably ran a bit
Yeah,
over
we-
time.
We'll finish off. Astronomy 2025 or a mug?
Oh. Do I want a mug? A mug or a astronomy 25?
You go, Rex.
I'll get the mug.
Well done. Thanks, Chris. Well done, mate.
Well done, Rex. Well done.
10. There we go. Ken. Ken. Well done. Astronomy 2025.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, well done. Okay. All right. I've lost my phone. There it is. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time. I just wanted to announce that we think we've sold the Quattro, the Society Quattro. So that releases or gives us some funds to buy some beginner scopes and loan scopes. So that's terrific news. We were just waiting for the money to hit the account. Sorry.
Who bought it? Somebody in the business?
A friend of the society, yes. So the newsletter will be out a little bit later in July. Usually out first of every second month. But we've had a lot on. We've got the open night coming up, and we've got the Messier Galactic Bulge Challenge, which I'll tell you about in a sec. So a little bit of a delay in the next newsletter. Just a reminder, the astrophotography group, the target we have is currently is the moon, and I think the next workshop's in July, about 22nd or so, but it's on our website. So what have you got there? The Messier Galactic Bulge Challenge. So that's an activity that's commencing in July. So the objective is to find 30 Messier objects in the night sky, and they're all located around the galactic bulge. So the gold standard is to star hop your scope or use your binoculars to go to the object, to each object, and then record an observation about that object. Alternatively, you can image the object or do some EAA, electronically assisted astronomy. So you can do that in one night or over several nights in July. So there'll be a chat channel opened up so that you can keep in touch with people who are doing the challenge. So the challenge is your own challenges. We're not challenging you. It's your own challenge to find all those 30 objects and have some fun with it. And sorry.
Are there prizes?
Well, yes. The second last point. There won't be prizes. The prize will be actually achieving it, but there will be some certificates that will be handed out sometime in August. So what else have we got there? So there's a resource pack. So very much indebted to Steve Harvey and Richard Grudzian about getting some information together on the challenge. So Steve has some tips and hints which will be part of the resource pack that will be sent out, and we'll be emailing that out later this week. So I think that's probably all I need to say. I think just encourage you to sort of be part of it. If you're into imaging, and there's some lovely objects among those 30, so we'd love to see those as well. So you'll get an email later this week. And then so you can then register. You need to just contact me, and I'll set you up in the chat channel if you want to be part of that, or just do it individually. This Saturday there'll be our practical. What do we call that, Dallas? Our practical evening. Hands-on. Yes. At Mount Pleasant. So if you're not familiar with star hopping, there's plenty of expertise out there to give you a hand on getting started. And they're the Society Dobsonian telescopes will be out for you to use as well. Other than that, we've got our open night coming up on the 4th of July, Friday the 4th. But this coming Saturday, we have a working bee starting at 2 o'clock. So we've got a few chores to do to get everything ready for the following week. So we'd love to see you there. I think that's pretty much it from me. I think I'll hand over to Richard, who's going to give us a little bit more insight into those objects.
Yes, thank you very much, Rob. Okay, we plugged in. Just before we start, I might open the. Just before I start talking about the Galactic Bowl, just briefly, if this thing opens, Microsoft products can be very cantankerous and quixotic, and sometimes these things don't open. They just refuse to open. Some of you who are going to help out on the public night, I've prepared this. You've all would have received this, I think. Ross, they would have got it, wouldn't they? The list in email, yeah. So I've got the telescope pads and I've allocated objects, and I've put in some notes and some suggestions about magnifications you could use. But just quickly, there are a couple of the first shed one is that area in front will be occupied by a few dwarf telescopes, and we're going to have who are the people who are going to be on that? Lisa, and we've also got Mark with his new Sea Star, which arrived today, I believe. So that's going to be dedicated. We have a few screens and people come along and they'll be able to look at those and see stuff, live taking place, which will be very exciting. Now, I think the azimuth and altitude settings are pretty right for 6:30. Remembering that now, of course, this is designed for that night at 6:30 p.m. Friday night. Next night there'll be a 4-minute difference. The Earth moves 1 degree every 4 minutes each day, so there'll be a slight shift in those figures, but not anything too significant.
Early on, but do you have any idea about weather?
Nope. Crystal ball gazing. Now, and along with that, we're preparing. I'm actually doing a narration for our 30 minutes, 30-minute slide presentation of members' images, which are so I'm doing a voiceover, and Greg England is doing it, putting it all dramatically together with a wonderful sort of turning into a video thing. We've got music with it and everything else. And when I was listening to my voice today, I didn't want to hear it. It's a terrible thing. So anyway, that's going to be on in case we have bad weather. People can watch that anyway while we're doing the other things. So if you've got any questions, now the reason I put this up here is some of you are going to be at Mount Pleasant next Tuesday for the 110 people or something from the homeschool education coming along, where I'm doing a laser tour of the sky, and you will be, some people might be inside and bring their scopes. You can use the same list, or I haven't allocated objects, but you can use this list if you want to, or the bigger one that I sent out earlier, I think, which has got a lot more objects on it. So I just thought I'd pop that up there to show you in case I hope this thing works. Anyway, the mouse is cantankerous. And Matthew, I'll talk to you later, Matt. Yeah, so that's that. Anyway, so have a look at that. And those of you working next Tuesday can, I should pin that on. Can you hear me clearly? Or everyone hear me all right? Sounds like nothing's happening here. Oh. Okay, so let's kill a few lights, and I'll put on this little. Now, apologies to those who have seen this production. Where is it? Exploring the Galactic Bulge. I hope it works.
While Richard's getting that going, for the people that don't have printers at home, I've got 10 copies of the resource pack for the channel. So this is the channel. So yeah, I've got 10 here if you don't have a printer at home.
Yeah. You know how I like music. I'm sorry. always hear my music coming up. I'll set the tone. Sorry? Yeah. Okay, so just quick, I'll whip through this because it's getting late. So the galactic bulge, well, you can see the main constellations there are Scutum, Ophiuchus, Sagittarius, of course, Scorpius above. The bulk of the centre of the galaxy is right behind Sagittarius there. All the things you're going to be looking at, well, 15 of them anyway, are inside Sagittarius. So all this area in the middle here, sorry, this thing doesn't work on Bluetooth. I don't know what's wrong with it. Very slow. Maybe it's because it's a screen, different kind of screen. But I just want to have a quick show you quickly which constellations we'll be looking at. So now, Serpens is in two parts. This part over here is the tail of the serpent, and this is the snake, and this is the head over here, comes down this side. So Ophiuchus is the snake bearer. He's upside down, his head is down here, his legs disappear into Scorpius. And so he's holding the snake like this, and if you know where objects are, it's easy to find them once you know that shape is a U. Okay, it's an upside down, the snake's upside down. Everything's upside down because all these things are done in the northern hemisphere. If you get stuck in finding this and you're looking at the night sky, you can always look at familiar little shapes like Corona Australis, which is easy to spot. And of course, the teapot asterism, which I'll come to in Sagittarius. So, let's move on quickly. I've given you a stellarium thing to show you the shapes of what we're talking about. Scutum is the shield. There's something down here we'll be looking at. But the key objects are up here, under Scorpius and down here in this chain going through the galactic plane. So that's a shot I took ages ago. Now, hopefully, if you look up there, anyone recognise that star? It's Antares. So if that's Antares, it's the heart of the Scorpion. So the Scorpion's around here somewhere. So if you look at around here, you can actually see, you can make out the shape of all the stars, Howlett and the stuff here, Milky Way there. And up here, this is a fascinating area. By the way, on the public night, some of you might be looking up here. This is the table of Scorpius cluster up here. And there are two stars there up to the right of it, Z1 and Z2 Scorpii. They are amazing. They look like a double. Something to look out for when you're doing all this. Very interesting part of the sky. And that's a Prawn Nebula. Down here you've got the Bug Nebula, the Cat's Paw, and the Lobster Nebula, or War and Peace Nebula. So if you look down here, you'll start to see star clusters. So that's Ptolemy's cluster, M7. M6, the butterfly cluster over here. You go further down. So when you get your binoculars out, if you're not familiar beforehand, get your binoculars out, practice, maybe Saturday night. Have a look and comb the area so that you know where to look. Hopefully, anything happening? All right. Oh yes, down here I'm drawing the teapot asterism. Now the reason you can't see it here is because there are stars in the field, and so it's hard to see. But if you're out there naked eye, you can see the stand. It stands out. The teapot is like Sagittarius is so obvious to look at, and so you've got the obvious of the tail of the Scorpion, and then down here Sagittarius. So straight across here, the first thing you come across is the Lagoon Nebula, M8, and right next to it, the little patch is the M20, the Trifid Nebula. And then over here, you've got these beautiful clusters, which I'll come to shortly. And they're all along here. But down here is this small Sagittarius star cloud. You'll need wide-angle binoculars. You can cover with a telescope, but really binoculars are better. That one's so big. And that's M24, by the way. And down here, M25, M23, M24, and then down here, you'll see two, follow this down here. You've got over here, you've got M17, the Omega Nebula, or Horseshoe Nebula, it's also called. And over here, the famous M16, the Eagle Nebula. So these are worth looking at. The stars in the middle, you can't see all the nebulosity. The star clusters then are quite easily seen in any telescope. So there we go. So we've got these down here. So all these objects are close. Anyone like to know what that is? Yeah, that's a great Sagittarius globular cluster, M22, and it's really easy to see. So if you know some of these stars at all, just sort of draw a line next to them, and I I mean, that's, I think that one there's Caus australis, and this one's Nummel subdira. It's got a weird name. And sort of make a nice little triangle between them. Right, there's Serpens calda. Now, remember the serpent's tail? So the serpent's tail comes up around here. This is a ficus, in other words. And down here, the ficus being in the middle. And the head of the, this is upside down. You can see a tree up there, don't worry. It's not going crazy. I've turned it over to make it easier to see. So ficus is there. And down here, this is a beautiful area, Corona australis. See the lovely shape of those stars I was pointing out to you? You can't see very well there because there are a lot of other stars, but because it's a photograph. But if you look around here, you've got the beautiful Corona australis nebula, which is stunning. Beautiful object photograph. Okay, so looking at this again, we're going to look at this area quickly and look at all the amazing objects in here. Here's the teapot drawn for you again, the right way up. But if we look at, sorry, I didn't mean to go so quickly. I should go back. Just one thing. Look at that, 15 Messier objects in Sagittarius alone. So what you've got to do is concentrate in this area, and you'll be able to see a lot of interesting stuff. Hang on, where are we? So, there's the lagoon. M20, the Trifid Nebula as well. That's a picture I took, two of them. And over here, M21, that's also on the list. So if you get your binoculars, you can do this. You can do that galactic challenge very quickly if you just scan this and say, oh, I've seen it with binoculars, tick it off. But it's probably better to spend a bit of time looking at it, soaking up the beautiful atmosphere of looking at these gorgeous star clusters, because they are spectacular. So down here, M22, there's that's a Hubble image, the centre of the globular cluster I was just talking to you about. And over here, right over, and this is the Sagittarius star cloud, and there's that beautiful nebula inside. I took that ages ago. It's amazing how many stars are in the field, the Sagittarius star cloud. And down here, M17, there it is, your mega nebula. I've got that now to the side. You have, Lisa? Oh, right. Okay. So M17, that's one throw I'll have to do. I haven't done that. And then down here, right, sorry, yes, a couple of star clusters, M18, M25, you can see all these in the same field. I put in M25, the picture of it is gorgeous and worth looking at through a scope. So I don't know how many of you have looked at that before. I haven't, but I've seen pictures of it and I'm very impressed. Very pretty and quite bright. And there are details of the magnitude of these things on that chart I had earlier. A lot of these things, if you look at that. So over here on the right, excuse me, another globular cluster. There are quite a few. A ficus actually takes the prize for the greatest number of globulars I've ever seen in a constellation, but there are quite a few out here anyway around Sagittarius. And there's one here, M69, M70. I'll show you. There it is there. So you can. There are quite a few beautiful globular clusters to look at. So if you stick to this area, you can't go wrong, which is the galactic bulge. And just tick them off. And further, just off the field of view there is another object that's on the list. I think it's a star cluster. Anyway, use binoculars first. That's my suggestion. So you get used to it. Practice that maybe Saturday night with Dallas's group and our rehearsal. Now, I've just got a few pictures that illustrate the sort of magnifications you can get. This is just stellarium information. I think with star clusters, anything from between 20 and 100 magnifications is fine. That's a broad church. Eventually, because star clusters are inherently bright, you don't get that dissipation you get when you get high magnification. You know, that weak, the duller sort of signal. It's like looking at a Mega Centauri high magnification, it looks duller. Of course, when you use low magnification, it's brighter. So, inverse square law and operation kind of thing, laid in an eyepiece. Pentax, forget the oculars, but that's 100 magnification. So even though it's a big globular cluster, it's not a patch on Mega Centauri in terms of size, but it's still quite bright. And there's a Sagittarius star cloud, and there's an illustration of 15 by 70 binoculars. So to give you an idea of what you need, what equipment you need for a particular object. And that's a picture of the Sagittarius cloud by Alan Dyer. On the go. That's that thing I just took that little area there. So, and there's M23, very pretty little cluster. And using my favourite eyepiece, the Bata Hyperion 31. And my telescope, that gives me, that's about 38, 39 magnifications. So that gives you an idea of what you're seeing. Some clusters are small, 6 arc minutes, 8 arc minutes, and then you get ones that are the size of the moon, 38 minutes. That's that thing I took earlier from the Sagittarius star cloud. That's IC284. I have to take a photo of that again. That was when I first started. I thought about what I was doing. So the Lagoon Nebula. Now, the Lagoon Nebula is, I have seen the Lagoon Nebula through the night. It's fantastic. And it's really, really bright. You've got a nice wide field and you've got a bright, really bright image. So I encourage those who will look at the lagoon for the first time, look at it through binoculars. And lovely, we've got lots of pictures of the lagoon, of course, but it's well worth looking at low magnification. So that one there's at, what's the magnification? 70 times. A lot narrower, but depends what you want to look at. Mission Nebula. Now Scorpius. Scorpius has got some interesting things. That one there, the top one, M4, beautiful globular. I think you weren't so impressed with it once, were you, Stefan? Was it you? Someone did not particularly like M4, but it's a nice thing to look at. M4, not M80. M80 is tiny and faint and not very enthralling. But down here, and you've got the two famous. You cannot miss these. So Ptolemy's cluster, butterfly cluster, just below the scorpion's tail. So look out for those. Use binoculars to find them as well, and they're fairly easy. There's a picture I took of the row of Phyke cloud. If you look up here, N-Tara is up the top there, and M4 down here on the left, and interesting little and row of Phyke, beautiful, lovely to look at. Get what that one is up there. It's a nice shot, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of my favourites. That's with the Takahashi, with the jaundice torpedo. The jaundice torpedo, as you call it. It's got a beautiful colour reproduction, very strong H alpha. That mirror, I don't know what they've done to it in Japanese, but it produces red like nothing else. I've not oversaturated that. That's what it looked like. I've processed it in the fiction side, and the blues too, beautiful. Yeah. I'll come back to that one day. But so anyway, all that area you're going to be looking at that if you're looking at that part of the sky on a public night. So a quick shot of the butterfly I took years ago. One of my first shots with a little refractor. You can see the butterfly quite clearly. The trouble is, if you photograph it, you're going to get all this other stuff in the background that starts to lose shape, with contrast. But of course, looking through a pair of binoculars. Different story, it stands out. Beautiful, beautiful thing to look at. So 25 arc minutes, so it's almost moon width. And over here, it gives you an idea what magnification I've got there, 50 magnification. So there you go. Get a nice idea of the pattern, will be nice and bright. So, and of course up to 100 you'll get the whole thing in there. Now, Ptolemy's cluster, beautiful, beautiful cluster. Much bigger, much spread out. Magnification here 30 times. I'll give you an idea of the whole thing. I forget how that's 500 light years or something like that. Anyway, let's move on to just quickly a ficus. Home of just near the end, they're not too far away. Got a few interesting M107 up on the left thigh of the snake bearer. 10 arc minutes, so that's pretty small. But M12 down here, M10, there are globulars everywhere here. In fact, if you looked at a detailed map of the ficus, look, they're scattered everywhere. Lots of globulars. So these are interesting to look at. So once you've finished over this area of the sky, over the bulge, you move to the left and spot these globulars, binoculars or telescope. And make sure you've got a right angle finder scope. So that, because a lot of you are using Dobsonians, so you don't want to crawl down on the ground looking up. And this is, So you need to line up your phone and make sure you've got, you know, wide angle prism, so you don't have to do it like a periscope or rifle scope. So M10, beautiful globulus in this area, very nice to look at and photograph as well as to, that one's 11 seconds, 20, 16, 8 minutes I think. Now, just quickly, I'm sorry I'm racing through this, but M9, yep, 9.3 seconds, minutes, it's not too big, is it? There's one up here, so you can see what I mean. If you look short of globular clusters on the night, even on the public night, just swing your telescope around and you'll pick up all these messier objects. So binoculars will give them away very quickly. They're not hard to spot. They're quite small. They are small, but even in a binoculars, they're still bright. You'll be able to spot them until the night starts. Non-stellar. They're definitely non-stellar. A bit like Charles Messier when he looked at them, thought they were all clouds. You know, those horrible mirrors they had back then in the 18th century. Speculum, whatever it was. So M62 is the last one. Someone's talking about was it you, Ross? M62 we're talking about? Yeah, 61 we're talking about, sorry. Yeah, that's 15. Okay, so now the serpents, the head of the serpent on this side, this is a beautiful cluster, the Rhodes cluster. It's worth looking at. I think it's about magnitude 5, 23 arc minutes. That's a lovely cluster to pick up. And on the left of our viewing area, but the Messier challenge, a good one. And then on this side, the serpent's tail, and down here, of course, you've got the Eagle Nebula, gorgeous pillars of Hercules and so on. Okay. And look out for the cluster, this area here with the head of the eagle, just inside there, it's beautiful to look at. 70 by 50 arc minutes, that's big. I think it's about 140 light years or 110, 140 light years that way. So it's quite a vast emission area. Now, Scutum has got something very interesting for us. M26, a beautiful star cluster, right in the middle of the shield, near the middle of the shield. And down here, M11, the wild duck, and I think it was Stefan. I was looking at that stuff in the sky, and I had never seen it. Some people say it's a whole flock of ducks, flying through the air, but you know, so the wings are out this way and the head's down here. It looks like one to me. A lot of people say it's a whole flock. Bit of imagination. Yeah, a lot of imagination. Anyway, that's 23 arc minutes, but these are very pretty objects to show people. So I'm open mind, they'll be good. And there's the Messier catwalk. You can always download this if you get stuck. We'll have a little light up near the thing for you on public night too, if you're manning a. Anyway, after you've finished Ross's Monsieur Galactic Challenge, you'll need a stiff drink. If there's only one drink in the universe that will do the trick. It's actually got a proper recipe. You find them online. I wouldn't recommend you drink it, but I don't know where you get a cube of Arctura and Megagen. But anyway, so that's it, folks. Sorry about the quick rush. So basically, just stick to that area, those 5 constellations you'll cover. If you're doing the message challenge, you'll cover all those easily, and you can use a lot of this stuff, of course, for our. Thank you. Thanks for Richard. Thanks again to the team from REAST. That fantastic presentation. Thanks to me for opening up.
And also Lisa for their sound and video. Next month we have, we're going to have a speaker, we're going to have a social night, a sumptuous supper. Ooh.